Hello again. Welcome back. This is Becca, usually going by Nightcat or Nightcat's Meow when online. And this is going to be another week dealing with Linden scripting language. I want to apologize again for the fact I didn't actually get one out last week. I had just come back from BronyCon and had a bit of a case of the con crud. As you can hear, it's still affecting my voice. I may have to edit out a lot of coughing over the course of this. And that's also going to attribute to my being very careful to keep this one somewhat brief. But I do want to pick up from the last tutorial we actually did, which was involving rezzing. So in that one, we set up how to actually put the rotation and position into, or put the position into the description. This time, we're going to actually deal with rotation as well as position, but we're going to not put it in the description. We're going to actually go back and worry about the description and parsing that next week, partly because I want to keep down the number of things I'm trying to teach at one time to make it a little easier to absorb everything, and partly because again, my voice isn't the best. I've been coughing for a week solid. All right. So, first you're going to need both the position and rotation. Owner say, string. Make this easier to understand for us. Actually, touched on this a couple of times, but we're going to make this very easy for us, the human, to use later. We're going to start, I believe that is the correct one for a line break. We'll know in a moment. And there we go. Now you see that dropped down. That \n just basically means a line break. It's like hitting enter before the line. And then these basically set the lines of code as needed. So, actually, better way to do this. Because we did cover that last week. Set region position. There we go. That'll be even better. Or you could just as well do that. By doing that, what we're actually doing is setting the command as part of the text string and just filling in the variable. It can save you so much time if you're dealing with a lot of these, and I have a few different tools I use myself that will just write the line of LSL code for me, then I copy and paste it. When you're dealing with making a whole lot of changes to something, that is so much easier. So we're going to make this a special operation just to make it easier to break down. Move it. Touch start. Move it. And that was a small goof because originally I was making it a variable that set it, but easy enough to fix. There we go. So if we were to move this board over here and flip around its rotation in some crazy way, it adjusted its rotation and moved itself automatically back to position. That confirms that those two features worked correctly. Now, the other thing I was going to go into, because this really isn't teaching you much new, is when you're dealing with a Rezzer box, like my black box Rezzer up here, work with me, machine, you're going to deal with putting a lot of pieces in, taking them out, manipulating them sometimes. You want to make sure that it only triggers when you want it to trigger. The way to do that is you may recall that on res requires an integer. We're actually going to use that integer. There's one, it's going to have a default value. So in case you ever forget what it is, it's good to remember what the default value is. Do I still have my Rezzers from last time available for me? Be that. Oh, that's right. We just set it up with a timer. So what we want, since this is not one of the ones that I'm going to successfully hold on to in my head, remember when I showed you how to put the net on a prim, res object, control C, control V. First thing we're placing is the res inventory. demo 2. Zero vector. That just means we're not applying a velocity. Velocity is important for things like that tennis ball throwing demo that I taught you a few weeks back, where a thing has to move once it's created. For this, we don't need it to move, so we don't need a velocity vector at all. So the constant for just making that nothing, zero vector. It just means 0, 0, 0. But zero vector is better for shorthand. Now, integer parameter. This is required whenever you're rezzing an object. You've got to have one. No exceptions. In this case, we're going to set that to 1. You will understand why momentarily. When it's just rezzed out into the world by hand, it gives you a value of 0. So anything that's not 0 means that it's rezzed from an object. In this case, we set it for 1. There it is. Gave back the response of 1, exactly as it should. So we'll pop this sucker back open. And on res, if rezzed equals 1, there we go. My mouse is starting to go. It sometimes double clicks when I don't mean it to. Rezzed from rezzer, and it takes its position. That's particularly important when you're dealing with creating a rezzer box or some type of controlled rezzing system, where you may have to take the parts out and do something with them. This means that you can make sure that it only acts that way when it's rezzed from here. A lot of the parts I have in my black box rezzing system, they function that way, especially the container boxes. As you saw when I set it up to res that specific, let's do it again. Let's do the stairs again. The first thing it reses is that container box right there, which then proceeds to res everything else. Those are triggered by a flag from the res object command, just like what we just created here. That way, I can pull one of those boxes out. Eaton stairs, that's the one we just dealt with. Plunk it down here. It doesn't do anything. I can go into that box and add and remove pieces, do whatever I need to do, and it won't spam the sim full of objects. It won't cause me any particular grief. It even says right here, not rezzed from Rezzers system, items not rezzed. So anytime that you have a controlled rezzing system or something that is supposed to respond only when set up from its rezzer, that's a good way to do it. You can also send a lot of other information that way. If you need to be able to change the behavior, say, for example, you want to fire a projectile that will be completely phantom. It's just for show. It will fly through objects in certain circumstances. Actually, for that one, you probably just want to res different objects. But if you say instead you want it to behave differently on impact, because remember, it takes this a second or two to process. I have in the past tried to convey complex things like color through a numeric code this way, but if the object was moving too quickly, it just doesn't have time to respond. But I can deal with breaking down pieces of data in next week's video when I have a bit more voice. And I will include how, if people are interested, I will include how to do that, how to make the same object res and have it script process different colors or different behaviors based on how it's res. You could even randomize that if you wanted to. You could have that be a random number. Anything that can be processed that way is fine. The only limitation is that it has to be a numerical value, and you want that value to not be 0. Because if it is 0, then it's going to be the same as if you just dropped it into world out of inventory. So, anyway, again, I know this is a particularly short one, and I know some of you are probably not happy with me because of missing last week, but I was at a con. I occasionally am going to take trips out like that, and I'm not always ahead on things. I've got a couple of projects, some related to SL, some not, that I'm working on at the moment, so it kind of got in the way of getting ahead on the videos. But I will always try to stay up to date and not leave you all hanging. But anyway, once again, this has been Becca, going by Nightcat or Nightcat's Meow when online. It's been wonderful to deal with you all, so good day, good luck, happy scripting, and look for these continuing along probably till at least November, continuing to turn up every Tuesday by noon Eastern Standard Time.